Welcome, everyone. So thank you for joining us this evening. You can go on to the next slide there, Tom. Sorry. So, right, okay. So what we're going to cover in the next hour, so we will do a quick intro from us and some context around the prize. We have some guest speakers, and we will be talking about how to identify and understand a particular climate problem, and then how to come up with a solution to that problem. So let's get going. So my name is Claire, and together with my colleague Tom, we'll be hosting the session tonight. We're from TPX Impact. We deliver ambitious and sustainable design outcomes to make a positive difference to how individuals and society experience the world. So we're currently working with West Yorkshire Combined Authority to deliver the Mayor's Innovation Prize. And to give you some context around the prize, here's a short video by the Mayor, Tracy Bramman, to tell us a bit about it.
Do you have a great idea how to make the world a better place? Our West Yorkshire Innovation Festival has thrown up some amazing ideas and creations to solve problems facing our society. But now it's your chance to share your idea with the Mayor's Innovation Prize. Prize is open to anyone between the ages of 16 to 26 who works, lives or studies in West Yorkshire. Now the winner will get £5,000 with other cash prizes up for grabs. So the brief is, what idea do you have to help our region tackle the climate emergency? We all know the climate crisis is the biggest risk we face in the future. So we need solutions, and you have got the ideas to help. So please give it a go. What have you got to lose? And it's not only cash you could win. A small group will take part in innovation boot camps to get tailored support, meetings with businesses, mentors to help you develop and test your ideas. Registration opens 31st of October, and you've got till the 2nd of December before it closes. So please help me save the planet, have fun on the way, and maybe earn a bit of cash.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. So for the competition, we're looking for ideas that help West Yorkshire tackle the climate emergency and counter the effects of climate change, as we heard Tracy just say. So this sounds big, and it is big, but the fact is that no single solution will address this. So it will require long-term action every day by everyone. So some solutions will be at policy level, others will be defined by new technological developments, but many solutions are driven by the actions and behaviours that every single one of us takes every day. So West Yorkshire has its own climate challenges, and we have them listed in the colourful boxes that you can think about focusing on. So in relation to the home, how we travel, green spaces around us, and how we interact with industry. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, cool. Thank you. So your idea could be a product, a service, a process, a campaign. It could be anything really. So for example, I don't know if anyone here has used the app Vinted. So this could be considered a solution to address clothes waste, keeping clothes away from landfill and from being burnt. We have Climate Action. This is a campaign. We have Leeds City Bikes. So this is a new service to encourage people to cycle. We have repair shops, which is used to reduce the amount that people buy. Carbon neutral concrete. This is a material that's more climate friendly. Next. So young people bring a unique perspective that policymakers, businesses, climate and innovation experts just don't have. So your experience challenges around climate change in a unique way. You are often not consulted on the development of solutions, and then people wonder why they're not successful. But young people have knowledge and lived experience that many who are responsible for addressing these climate emergencies, they just don't have. So this session is to start thinking about ideas you could develop for the climate emergency challenges. So our first speaker, so someone who's addressed the issue of waste in West Yorkshire, is Rob Greenland from Zero Waste Leeds. So over to you, Tom.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so we're joined by Rob Greenland from Social Business Brokers CIC, and Rob and I are going to have a conversation about innovation and some of the ideas that he's come up with. So Rob, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, thanks for inviting us, Tom.
And I guess it'd be great if you could just give us a very quick introduction to Social Business Brokers and what it is you set out to do.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, we're a Leeds-based social enterprise. We set it up 12 years ago, and the idea is to try to work with people to come up with projects that I suppose achieve two big things. One is around a kind of social impact, so you know, kind of projects that are good for people, but also the kind of environmental impact as well. You know, and obviously, you know, particularly at the moment, because we're trying to find ways to respond to the climate emergency. You know, the climate work for us and has become particularly important. So we've worked on a few different things. We've worked on housing. We've got a project to bring empty homes back into use. We've worked on social care and a few other kind of themes. And then since 2018, we set up a project called Zero Waste Leeds, because we wanted to look at practical ways to respond to the climate emergency. And as part of Zero Waste Leeds, we've been running a variety of campaigns on various themes, and one that you can see there on screen is around clothing, because obviously we all wear clothes, and clothing and textiles, they're responsible for around 10% of the kind of climate emissions. So we've done quite a lot of work on clothing, and I'm sure some of this will come back in the conversation. But we decided, as well as doing campaigns, we try to set up practical projects, and we've got a project that I think we'll be chatting about, Tom, a Leeds School Uniform Exchange, which, as I say, is trying to respond to the climate emergency, but also do it in quite a practical way that local people can get involved in. So yeah, that's a bit of a background to our social enterprise.
Thanks, Rob. And let's talk about Leeds School Uniform Exchange. Could you tell us a little bit about how you identified the problem that actually inspired this innovation? What was it that made you think we need to do this school uniform exchange?
Yeah. So I mean, I think there were kind of two parts to it, really. I mean, often, you know, things come to us from personal experience, I think, don't they? And it was probably about 10 years ago. I mean, my son was at primary school, and at the end of, I think, probably his first summer term, I spotted the caretaker taking some bags to a skip in the car park, and being a bit nosy, I kind of asked him what was in the bags, because I hate to see things getting thrown away. And he told me it was school uniform. It was basically the kind of lost property that they had left at the end of the term, and what they tried to do was get it back to families, but you know, things didn't have people's names on and things like that. And they would always just ended up with loads of stuff at the end of every term. So it was going in a skip. So I couldn't really cope with that as an idea. So I said I'd take it, and we took it home, we washed it, we sorted it. And then next term we just had a couple of trestle tables on the path outside school, and just offered it all for free to people at the end of school. And nearly all of it went. People were delighted to get stuff for free. So that was the first bit. That was a good few years ago. And then the second part of the story, I suppose, is kind of early months of COVID. And I don't know if people will remember, you know, kids weren't at school for a good few months in those first few months. And two things happened there. One was that because kids weren't at school, there was loads of uniform that kids had grown out of that was in really good condition. But the other thing was that it was quite hard to buy school uniform. You know, shops were closed, and there were supply issues. So we basically, in a really difficult situation, we spotted an opportunity, because we knew that people were looking for uniform, and we'd also been approached by people at the council who were concerned that obviously people, you know, were struggling financially, were struggling to get uniform, and could we help to find a way to get second-hand uniform moving around the city. So yeah, so a long story and a kind of more recent story. They're a bit of the background to the project.
Thanks, Rob. And when you were devising the school uniform exchange, were there any particular challenges that you needed to overcome, or barriers, or things that you kind of tried out that didn't work as you developed the idea?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the main one is around the model for the school uniform exchange, because basically, just to give a bit of background to what we've done, we've helped to set up a network of exchanges across the city. So some of those are run by schools, some of those are run by parents, some of them are run by community groups, some are online, like Facebook groups and things like that, and then others are run as kind of pop-up shops and, you know, the part of community groups. And I think that one of the challenges for us, I mean, if you think of the city of Leeds, there's about 125,000 young people at schools. There's about 300 schools. It was going to be really difficult for us to run a central exchange for all that uniform for all those schools. So we very quickly kind of picked up on the idea that we had to work with local people to set up exchanges that made it as easy to exchange uniform as it would be to go to Asda or Matalan or whatever to buy kind of uniform. So I think that challenge of trying to, as I say, kind of get those relationships across the city, you know, and that took time, but we knew that was the right way to do it. I think that was a kind of a challenge for us. And I suppose, I mean, something else was around that model, you know, which requires people and organizations across the city to set things up. There's obviously a risk that some areas will end up without an exchange, and sometimes that might be areas of the city where people could benefit most from it. So I suppose we worked hard to try to work with, you know, community groups and people we knew across the city, where we could see there was a gap, to work with people to set things up. And yeah, I mean, the slide there gives a good example of stuff we did over the summer. So we recognize that you've got to make it as easy as possible for people to access uniforms. So over the summer we worked with groups, and we had 37 pop-up shops across the city, and most of them were at Breeze events, so local community events where the council runs for local families. So whilst you know, children and young people were on bouncy castles and getting candy floss or whatever else, all the activities that were going on, mums and dads were coming to our stall and stocking up on loads of school uniforms. So again, really trying hard to make it as easy as possible for people to do the right thing, but also do something that is really kind of useful to them and saves them. You know, in some cases you can, you know, you save in a couple of £100, you know, if you've got 2 or 3 children and you come to us to get all your school uniform.
Thanks, Rob. And it sounds like the impact has been huge in terms of the events and the amount of uniform that you've exchanged, but also just on people as well, as shown by that quote. Is that's from somebody who's made use of the exchange, is it?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, that was someone who came to one of the pop-ups at the Breeze events over the summer. And I mean, again, you know, on top of obviously the last 2 or 3 years of COVID, we've got, you know, a real cost of living crisis for people. And at the end of the summer, it's a really challenging time for people's finances, you know, and they were able to come to this event, you know, and as I say, save themselves a lot of money. But also we really push the idea that this is about exchanging, do you know what I mean? So you come to that event and you could get some free uniform, but we encourage people to join their local exchange, and next time they've got some uniform to offer that to other people. So it's not just about, you know, the opportunity to get hold of school uniform. It's also about opportunities to offer uniform to other people when you've got some kind of surplus.
Thanks, Rob. I just want to take a minute just to check if there was anybody either in the chat or on the screen who wanted to ask a question before we move on to an activity linked to what Rob's just shared.
Yeah, hiya, sorry, I'm in bed because I'm feeling unwell, but this is really, it's really interesting, and thank you, Rob, for the presentation. So I'm from the University of Huddersfield, and I'm engaging students in the Mayor's Innovation Prize. And one of the things that I think that would be interesting for them to understand is what is the financial model, let's say, of this Leeds school uniform exchange. You know, like in this picture, I can see a gazebo, I can see tables, there would have been other resources. How is that funded? And what advice would you give students participating, thinking about how they figure out the funding of their idea? Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So just the specifics of our funding. I mean, we for Leeds School Uniform Exchange, we've got some funding from the council, and they're particularly interested in the financial savings that we can bring to to families who are struggling in the city. So it's come from their financial inclusion team. And I suppose the point there is about trying to think, what are the social impacts that you bring and who might be interested in you achieving those impacts and therefore funding it. So it's finding the people in the council who are working with people who are kind of struggling financially. And then, as you say, in terms of some of the running 37 pop-up shops is quite labour intensive and quite intensive in terms of people's capacity. I think one thing I'd recommend, and what we tried to do there, is kind of jumping on the back of other people's activities. So those Breeze events were set up and they were looking for stall holders. We could just jump in with our stall, and we then got access to thousands and thousands of people who were at that event, rather than us thinking, right, we need to set up our own thing and then attract loads of people to it. So I think, as I say, kind of thinking about your impacts and who might fund them, but also thinking quite creatively about how can you partner up with other people or organizations who can maybe help you to reach the people that you're looking to reach, and therefore have the impact that you're looking to have. So hopefully that gives a bit of guidance on that.
It's really helpful. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Catherine.
Were there any other questions before I move on to the next section? No? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next section, but there'll be more opportunities later on to ask more questions. So that story is really helpful, and it helps us get into the practicalities of developing a new idea and doing innovation. And there's different ways you can think about it, but one way that's really helpful is to think about different phases of the process. And you might think of the first phase in terms of identifying a problem. So based on this big theme of the climate emergency, we've seen how it actually touches on lots and lots of different aspects of life and lots of different things that we experience. In Rob's case, the experience of seeing all of those school uniforms that are being taken away by a caretaker, something in his lived experience, has helped him identify a problem which he's sought to address. And each of us have different experiences and different things that are going on in our lives where there are problem areas that link to climate change that we would be interested in addressing. So for the next few minutes, it'd be really good to get a sense from people here if there are particular problem areas that you think are worth addressing. It might not be that you've got a fully fleshed out idea about how to address them, but there might be something that's on your mind or something that you care about related to climate change that you think is worth addressing. We've listed a few in this slide and in previous slides of all sorts of different things that climate change relates to and connects with, but this is not an exhaustive list. This is just a sample of all the different things that are going on. So I'm going to give people maybe 30 seconds now, and we'll hopefully get a bit of a chat wave to list some different areas that people think might be worth addressing, or they've got an interest in addressing potentially, or they know somebody who's got an interest in addressing, and it'd be interesting to pick up some of that in the chat. And as we do this, I'm realizing that I can't see the chat window.
I can see it, so I've got my eye on it.
Okay then. That's cool. So I reckon as people have a think and you pop your ideas in the chat, so this is just about identifying a specific problem. I'll share a few pointers for those who are thinking about entering the prize competition. So our step one is that it's really important to identify a problem area. And there are a few things that you might want to keep in mind as you're thinking about your problem area, and you'll see how some of these things relate to Rob's experience here. So the first thing for this competition is to think about whether your problem is in scope. The mayor was really clear in her video that she's interested in potential solutions to addressing the climate emergency. So whatever the problem is, obviously there are all sorts of different things we can think about addressing or solving. We want to make sure that the problem we're thinking about is in scope, has some kind of impact on or relates to the climate emergency. You might want to think about what's around you. So literally, what's in your lived experience? What do you know about day to day? What things do you see and understand in your daily life that give you an insight into that problem? Have you seen something that makes you angry or upset or annoyed or confused about the way things work? All of those experiences you might not think of as necessarily the source of great new ideas, but actually many ideas come from that lived experience. We're interested in stuff which affects our particular county. So we want to make sure that the ideas that we're generating are related to West Yorkshire. So they could be to do with climate effects in West Yorkshire, or they could be to do with behaviours or ways of working of people in West Yorkshire. And another thing to consider is the impact. So it might be that you come up with lots and lots of different areas, lots and lots of different problems that you want to address. Climate change is something that's really complicated, and actually that emergency affects all aspects of our life in different ways. So you may find yourself coming up with lots and lots of different things which you want to change, lots of problems that you've identified. It may be worth having a think about the potential impact of change on each of those areas, and considering if you have to make a choice, which problem, if you addressed it or you could make a dent into it, would have the biggest impact, either in terms of the effect on emissions or the effect on people's behavior, or the types of change that could affect other organizations or a number of people. There are lots of different ways to think about impact, but those are just a few pointers for you to consider as you're developing your idea. I'm going to have a quick check to see if there were any ideas posted or anything that specific that people have in mind before I move on to our next speaker.
Yeah, you can just move on. Let's keep going.
Okay then. So hopefully the screen is still visible. And so our next guest speaker is Chloe Foster, who's the co-founder of the Applied Negative Emissions Centre. And that organisation helps businesses to reduce their carbon emissions. And Chloe works with them to come up with practical ways in which they can meet the commitments that they've made to reduce their carbon emissions and offer different carbon removal strategies or offsetting opportunities. So Chloe, thank you so much for joining us today. It'd be great to hear a bit more about your experience. Maybe if we could start by telling us a bit more about you, your business and the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you for having me. You're quite a good summary there, to be honest. And in my name, that's just what the ANIC is. It's a lot of words, so we usually just say ANIC as well. So you know what that means in my name, if you can see that too. We work with different organisations, businesses, councils to specifically work on what is generally quite a hard area of emissions to mitigate. Usually so kind of scope 3 emissions, it might be from supply chains, it might just be the kind of really tough ones that they've got stuck, even if they've made significant progress in their kind of decarbonisation journey. So we kind of work with that particular area to give them some innovative options. It might be reliable offsetting options, specific carbon removal tech that they can implement maybe on their site if they've got offices, so they can integrate it maybe in their heating systems. If they're more kind of agricultural based, different options for their land usage that could improve that carbon intake and make sure they kind of successfully get to their net zero targets as they actually set them out, because obviously it's quite a difference sometimes between setting them and then actually being able to make that progress towards achieving them as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Chloe. So giving businesses that support to actually deliver on their promises is really important. And actually that is a form of innovation, finding ways to help people to meet the commitments that they have already set out. Now, Chloe, you've helped set this up, but you're somebody who's kind of gone on an innovation journey yourself, and you've participated in programs like this through Innovate UK. To help you kind of develop your ideas and think about innovation. So could you tell us a little bit about the Innovate UK program you were part of, and maybe what positive effect being part of a sort of innovation challenge has had on your career and your ability to make a difference in this area?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm part of a Young Innovator cohort. So that's the Innovate UK research and innovation kind of funding and also mentoring. So it's quite similar to the way that this programme will also develop. So say very similar, £5,000 of funding, which has kind of added security to quite a young business. So it's kind of made sure that running costs are sorted. You don't necessarily have to stretch yourself between project to project. Which is sometimes the teams felt a bit kind of, manic with lots of different activities going on. It gives you that security. And also the mentoring side of things has been kind of really invaluable. I was lucky enough to have 2 different mentors, because I had one from the beginning and then swapped over to a different one at the latter. And it's so good to have that kind of fresh pair of eyes. So you're in your business 24/7. You think everyone else knows what you're talking about. You use, particularly in our area, technical acronyms, scientific acronyms. Translating that to someone who doesn't really know anything about it can be quite difficult. So having that fresh set of eyes to say, actually, maybe we should be talking about it in this way, or have you thought about doing this, or is this kind of area more suitable for you? Things like that, the suggestions that they can point you on the way. You can also utilize their existing network as well as your own, obviously, but if you've got kind of different, you want to explore a new area, you're not quite sure how to do something, they'll know somebody who can either point you to a great resource or just actually have a chat with them, and they'll be able to help you out with that as well. I think the element of feeling supported is also really important for a young business or someone kind of exploring a new idea, because at times it sort of feels like you're on your own and working really hard on something in your own area, and you don't really see the results immediately, you're on a longer time scale, things like that. So having somebody there being like, no, this is really great that you're working on this, or like you've made really good progress in this area, is really good for kind of bolstering you in that journey, and supporting you through the kind of commitment to progress to the next stages as well.
And when you were coming up with your idea for your business and setting it up, did you have to do any research, or did you have to test out your ideas with people? And could you tell us a little bit about any sort of methods or techniques that you used in that process?
Yeah, definitely. So my background is more in the sort of environmental policy area side of things, whereas my co-founders are more in the kind of technical environmental science, chemistry background of things as well. So kind of meshing those together required research in itself. So kind of matching up people's expertise in my kind of bringing me up to speed on the technology side of things, then bringing them up to speed on, there might have been, international net zero targets, national net zero targets, those sort of things. So making sure that we're on a kind of level playing field in terms of information is a really good way of starting that out as well. And also just gap filling is an important skill to know. You kind of recognize where you've got maybe a little, you're less confident in your knowledge or your skills in that as well. So you can kind of delve into that research area too. So the technical side of things, the kind of policy side of things, also just kind of networking, so there are people doing a similar thing that we could maybe help out, any companies offering cool technologies that we want to help supply and things like that as well. I think just kind of mapping out the area that you're working in is a really useful method of doing that, even if it's just on LinkedIn, having a cheeky little stalk of some people's profiles to kind of check out what projects they're working on, things like that can be really helpful as well. Also kind of university research institutions are always publishing new information, so that's a good way of kind of assessing what's happening in your area, as well as meeting some new people who are kind of maybe working on a similar topic to you as well.
And what would be your message to any young people who are passionate about climate change and want to do something, aren't sure whether they can take the idea that's in their head any further? What would be your message to that person?
I think there is incredible value in trying. And even if it doesn't work out the way you think it might work out just as well in a slightly different way. And I think the drive to know you're making impact and changing people's lives, both on a local, national, international scale, whatever that is, that drive to make that difference is worth the effort in trying. So it sounds like a very scary task. but it can also be very rewarding as well, working in an area that you know is making a difference.
Thanks, Chloe. I'm just going to give people the chance to ask any questions if they have any, if anyone has a question for Chloe before we move on. I cannot see any. Again, there's a chance to ask more questions at the end. So I'm going to hand over to Claire now to move us on to the next section.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. We did have we have a comment by Harrison.
Oh, in the chat, sorry.
Yeah, it just came in. What does ANEC mean?
Yeah, so it's the Applied Negative Emissions Centre. It was lots of words at the beginning of the screen there. It's just a shortened way of saying it, basically.
Cool, thanks.
And Harrison, thank you. Now that I can see the chat, thank you so much for putting in your potential problem area. The bus being cancelled or being full. Public transport is a really important area. And so that's exactly the sort of area where potentially an innovation or a suggestion could really have a big impact on this area, because obviously if we can get more people using public transport, doing active travel, that would have a significant effect on our emissions. So yes, Harrison, that's exactly the sort of area that we want to develop.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Next, moving on. So the next section is about understanding the problem. So if you've already identified a problem, for example, Harrison is thinking about the bus and the problems that gives for him. So the next step would be to really understand this in more detail. And so you're trying to solve a need, you're trying to address a need. Next slide, please. Is there one before that, Tom? Here we go, yeah. So, so what you do if you want to find out more things about the problem, we've just heard Chloe talking about like networking, kind of really understanding things on the technical side. Some other things that you could do. So really researching the problem is about putting yourself in the shoes of the user and empathizing with them. So you can do this by observing or interviewing those who are affected by the problem. You can speak to experts in your problem area. You can visit organizations. You can gather quantitative data. This is information in numbers of people affected by the problem. How many people are on the bus when it's too full? How many buses does it take for an empty one to come? You can gather and you can do desk research online, look at books, you can run focus groups, or you can organize a survey. Next slide, please. So what would this research look like if you were looking at the context of problem if you're looking at a problem you've chosen? So there are many ways you can research something, but I'm just giving you one example here. So if you're interested in waste, perhaps you spend a day observing at school. Where do you see a lot of waste? Perhaps this might be in a cafeteria at school. There might be huge amounts of food waste. You could run a survey to find out how many students regularly finish their lunch and those that throw it away. You could interview someone who's close to this, perhaps a pupil. Why aren't they eating their dinner? You could talk to the catering staff to hear their thoughts on it. You could consider speaking to experts in the field. So this could be someone from another school who would use their food waste, or an expert in food recycling or composting. And again, then you could read up about the issue online. Do other schools face the same problem and challenges? What do they do about it? So all these efforts would give you a really good understanding of the core problem that needs to be addressed. Next slide, please. There's one, yeah, perfect. So in this innovation process that we're talking about, the next kind of step or thing that you would do after your research is, and identifying your core need, is to use a technique where we reframe it into what we call a how might we question. So this is basically a rewording of the core need or problem which you have uncovered through your research. So we do this as it helps us to focus on the user needs and the problems rather than jumping straight to the solution. So what exactly is a how might we? It's a statement, and it's useful because it suggests the solution is possible. It's letting you explore a variety of ideas or ways to design a solution. And it's a great way of moving away from just looking and admiring at the problems and getting down to the detail and finding something to work on. So how is solution orientated, might is optimistic, and we is collaborative, and focus on turning your challenge into ideas for action. Next slide, we have an example of a way that you could do this. Yeah. So with a sheet of paper, you can put like your broad problem statement at the top of the paper, like the climate issue you're focusing on is we don't use public transport enough. Harrison, this very much relates to you. So through your research and talking to users, you would have by then identified some specific challenges that they face. So one, for example, here is I don't feel safe on public transport. So then in the column across from it, the right column, you can then write your how might we statement. So how might we support people to feel safe on the bus? Next slide. So next slide. So now we're going to our next guest speaker, which is Tom Forth. And he is talking about the Leeds Bin app. So I'll hand over to Tom.
Yes, hi Tom, welcome.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. So we've talked about framing up, identifying a problem, considering how we can do a bit more research into it, and the how might we question is a good technique we can use to turn a problem towards a potential solution. And so now, Tom, it'd be really great to hear from your experience of developing a solution to a problem relating to climate. And I'm really interested in the Leeds Bins app, which I've got on my phone actually and use to help me work out when my bins are due. Yes, exactly. So Tom, could you tell me a little bit about the problem that you identified and why you were interested or passionate about this issue and how you developed this potential solution?
Yeah, certainly. So the Leeds Bins app is used by about 35 to 50,000 households in Leeds every week. It tells them when their bins are going to be collected. Green, brown and black bins, depending on the different schedules that are in different parts of the city. And the number one top thing that users really like about it is it lets you save the bin days to your calendar, and you can be reminded either in the morning before you put them out or in the night before if you want to put them out the night before. And so what was the challenge? What was the problem? How did we find it? So we found it via the waste service. So the waste service of Leeds City Council at that time was led by a man called Girish Solanki, I think. He sort of came to us, he said, we've got this open data about bin collection schedules. I've got two problems though, Tom. One is the number one thing that annoys people in Leeds and makes them ring me up as the service leader is they forget to put their bin out. They think that their bin hasn't been collected, but actually they just put it out too late. And so they ring up the council and say that you missed my bin. And he said, now I'm not going to get into blaming people for putting their bin out too late, but if I could remind them the night before or early in the morning to put their bin out, that would save me a lot of hassle. And so I said, oh, well, there's a problem. We can fix that because you release open data on when every bin in the city will be collected, and we can make an app for that. And then there was a second part to that, which is related but quite different and quite important, was what happens when people miss having their bin collected? What they do is they use their other bins incorrectly. So they start putting waste that's going to landfill in the recycling bin, or they put recycling waste in the landfill bin, or they put everything all in one bin. And in any case, people don't actually know what goes in what bin. So part of the app includes, as well as the reminders and when your bins will be collected, it also tells you what should go in each bin. And that's quite nice because it's in the reminder and your calendar. So it when you are reminded at 7 a.m. in the morning to put your green bin out, it does say, remember plastics, paper, tins, no glass, please. And no glass, please is the last part of the important part of these bins. Leeds City Council don't collect glass from households directly, but they do provide hundreds of bottle banks where people can drop their glass off. The problem is no one knows where they are, but they do actually publish the open data on where their bottle banks are. So we put that in the app. It's right there below when your bins will be collected if you want to take glass somewhere. So those are the three problems. They were known by the service who work in waste all the time. They had the data, but they didn't have the skills to build the app. And they said, can you build that app for us?
Thanks, Tom. And did you have to test or prototype the app, or were there, stages of developing it to make sure that you got it right? Did you have to change anything in your journey, or was it just instantly you had the idea, the app was perfect?
Yeah. So the way that I always work writing software, whether it's an app or a website or software that you would install in the cloud or wherever it is I'm always very keen to have the first version working within 2 weeks. It's sort of an arbitrary target that I set myself. And what I mean by the first version is the first version let someone type in their postcode. At that time, we didn't have their address lookup working, so they just had to type in their postcode. And it had no styling, so it was just black and white text in the app. And the app actually didn't work on a phone, it worked just on a website, but it could tell you when your bins would be collected. And it didn't do it in any kind of a usable way. You could save the bin days to your calendar, but they would always be the same bin days. They wouldn't be the ones for your address. The lookup, the map for the glass collection, that didn't work at all. It was probably 3 or 4 months before we could add the feature of saying where the green bin, what went in your green bin. So yeah, it's been a huge process, and that's both internally within the build. So we built the first version in 2 weeks, but the first version is completely and because of this is how we do things. I don't think you have to work like this, but it can push you a bit. We actually put it on the App Store after 2 more weeks, so it was available to download after 4 weeks. I suspect we were a bit lucky there. We didn't promote the app, so not many people downloaded it, but it was probably quite good within about 3 or 4 months. And the reason that we put it on the App Store was that it was sort of passed around within Leeds City Council, and there were people within the City Council who were using the app, and they were, in a way, they were the perfect test users for us, because although it is one, so they knew that it was sort of related to the council, so they weren't too rude to us when things didn't work. So that was good. But it was also nice because they are a really fantastic cross-section of the city. So when I say the council were using it, it wasn't just waste services, because people in waste services know when the bins are collected. It was people in social care teams, it was people in economic development, it was people in all public transport teams. They were all using the app. They were feeding back to us. They were just continually suggesting things that needed fixing, improving, making feature suggestions. I mean, one of the coolest feature suggestions that we got was actually from NHS Digital. I forget the name of the head of design at NHS Digital. I was at an event. He said, "I really love the app, but could you just add a feature that says the next collection will be? I don't like looking at the calendar. I just want to know when's the next collection." And it's a nice feature. So now if your bin is going to be collected tomorrow, it will say your black bin will be collected tomorrow. And that was the sort of thing that I just hadn't thought of doing. He wanted it. He said, "Why don't you do this?" And we did it. And I think we had that live within a week from adding that feature, but it's been continually responding to requests. We actually have a forum where people can make suggestions, and we've used quite a few of them. That's quite good, yeah.
So lots and lots of ways in which over time, the app is being tweaked and changed based on listening to people's suggestions, and we don't necessarily get our idea perfect first time round. That's all part of the process.
Definitely, yeah.
And finally, I'm really interested to get your sense of innovation generally and people participating. So the point of this prize is to encourage young people, of all backgrounds, to have a go at coming up with an idea they'll get support to develop that into something tangible, but we think that everyone should kind of just get involved and see where their idea takes them. In your experience of somebody who's done this, has developed this product and other products that have helped solve problems, do you think that you need any kind of special qualifications or special background or access to particular institutions in order to be an innovator or to solve problems? Is this something that anyone can do, or do you think our entrants need to have something particularly special about them?
So I mean, I think the number one qualification that you need is to be willing to try something, and I don't want to underplay that. It can be quite hard to do the first thing and know that it's not very good. Like if I look back, say 15 years ago when I was first writing software, developing apps, writing web pages, if I look back at them now, I could do them now so easily. It would be easy to do it. And I remember that they took me months, or they were really hard. And what I think it can be easy to get frustrated by that. But actually, when I look back on it, it's only through that process of trying something, daring to show it to a few people, listening to what they say, that you can learn how to do things. I think there's like a little bit of a superpower there as well, which is most people don't do anything. So just by actually trying something, it could be the very smallest thing. You're already doing quite well. And so I'd give an example, so I write software. Writing software is not massively easy. So you probably do maybe need some special qualifications or some experience at least. We've had a lot of apprentices here at Open Innovations in the Data City, so you can get the experience through lots of different routes. But if you're talking about improving people's knowledge about bin collections, actually anyone can make a sticker. If you think about it, what would a campaign be for improving recycling quality in Leeds? What if you designed a fantastic sticker that went on top of every green bin in the city, and you got people to stick that on the bin? Now, I think everybody would have an idea where to start there. And what I think would be quite interesting with that is, again, if you say, I'm gonna design a sticker that will go on every bin to remind people what they can recycle, 9 out of 10 people will come back to you and say, no, that's a rubbish idea. If that was going to work, council would have already done it. Oh, what are you wasting your time on doing that? And that's where I think that superpower is. Try it. Most of the people who tell you it's a rubbish idea and you shouldn't bother with it, and the council will do it anyway, most of those people aren't going to do anything. And I bet you if you try something, could be anything like that, loads more ideas than I could come up with, I reckon most of them will be surprisingly successful. And you just have to listen, right? You do have to listen. That's the key thing. Your first idea will never be good. It would never be good, but your first idea will probably be a first step on the road to something really good if you are open to listening to feedback from people who are using the thing, or even, I think users are really valuable. Listening to people who use a thing is really important. There's also quite a big value in the acquired wisdom of people who've been in a service for a long time. So like I say, the people who work in waste services at Leeds City Council don't need to look up when the bins are being collected. They generally know, but they do have between them thousands of years of experience of what people are looking for from waste services. So listening to users is really important, but also listening to people with a lot of experience can be quite important. They've usually got really good ideas.
Great, thank you so much, Tom. Before we move on to the final section, I just want to check if there was anybody who had any questions for Tom or any of the other speakers at this point. I can't see any, so I'm going to hand over to Claire to explain one more activity which we think you could all do at home and in school to help you get into the mode of trying something.
Download the Leeds Bins app. Download the Leeds Bins app.
We're going to tell you a bit about the competition again, just to remind you. And yes, definitely download the Leeds Bins app if you live in Leeds. It's really useful. Claire, over to you.
Okay, great. So we've just heard about Tom's process for developing his idea and his app. So he didn't get it right first time, as we heard, and got loads of feedback from people along the way. So when you have identified your problem and pinned down your how might we question, as we've just talked through, the next part of the process is about generating solutions. So there are lots of different methods and techniques that can be used to move beyond the initial and often obvious and maybe sometimes bad idea. We all have at the beginning and get more of those high quality ideas. So we're going to introduce you to one of these techniques in a moment. But first, next slide, please. I'd just like to talk you through the principles of ideation. And these are important guiding rules when coming up with ideas. So first off, turn off judgment and criticism. The aim when you're ideating is to produce lots of ideas, and we want them to be wild and unusual. So often they are not going to be solutions that could actually work initially, but this is how you move beyond the obvious ones. So when you've generated lots of ideas, then you go back and build on them. So that was a crazy idea, but there's one small part of that idea that could be really good, that could be mixed with another part of another idea. So even though you're coming up with multiple unusual solutions, you're always keeping in mind and you're always addressing your how might we question. So that you should always stay focused on that aim. Okay, next slide, please. So now I'm going to introduce you to a technique for ideating that you can do yourself at home or with a team. So it's a really quick way to generate ideas. It's called Crazy Fours, or you could do Crazy Eights. So you draw 4 ideas in 4 minutes. And when you're doing this, you don't need to worry about like your drawing skills. You just give it a go. So in this particular example, we would ask you to one of those 4 ideas has to be the worst idea. So it needs to be an idea that would not work or that would in fact make the problem worse. And then you can pick some random pictures. So we've included roller skates and chickens here. So that worst idea has to include the chickens. So an example of that would be if every student, so if we kept going on the waste thing, how might we reduce food waste in schools? The worst idea could be if every student finishes their lunch, so there'd be no food wasted, they would watch a bunch of chickens racing on roller skates. Terrible idea. And then you would flip that idea and you would turn it into something positive, an idea that might work. So there might be something about that, some kind of reward or prize for finishing your lunch. And then if we were talking about like ideas that might work, so these are still unusual out there ideas, like having a voting system where every meal gets a rating, and if students don't like it, they disappear from the menu. You could have a huge blackboard in the canteen where students write down suggestions of meals that they want, or there's a point system with rewards for finishing your lunch. So do try this activity at home. It's really good fun and a really good way to start ideating and thinking of ideas. So next is back to Tom.
So what we've tried to do in this hour is give people a little bit of a taster through actual real life examples and some principles of a broader innovation process, where you first take some time to understand the problem. You then generate lots and lots of ideas, and we've looked at those 2 phases in particular. But obviously, once you've generated those ideas and you start to test and refine them, you want to get into delivering an actual solution to the problem. And in a sense, this prize is a good way and a really accessible and simple way to get some support to be guided through the whole of this process. So we obviously are asking at this stage for people's initial ideas for what they would want to do to address climate change in West Yorkshire. But then after that, you'll be given some additional support through sessions between January and March to go through this process in a bit more detail and a bit more guidance, and you'll be helped to kind of test things out, develop your ideas and present a more tangible solution, which you'll be able to share with the mayor. And so really, we believe that everybody, every young person has the talent, the creativity to come up with an idea that can help us address this big problem. And that's why we are running this prize. We are open for applications now, and we really want to encourage all of you to go onto the website and submit your idea. It's a really, really simple process, and we are not asking for a lot from you because most of the content and the developing of the idea will happen after you've entered. There are 3 ways that you can enter. First, you can, if you want, submit a video. And we're only asking for 2 minutes where you or your team can just tell us about your idea and the impact it will have. If you don't want to use a video, that's fine. You can use some slides using PowerPoint or Google Slides. And we're looking for no more than 3 slides telling us about your idea. Or if you don't want to use slides, you can use a good old-fashioned written document. But if you're writing something, we want no more than 300 words. So we think that's something that you could all do. That's really, really straightforward. And some things that we'd like to hear in your application is details of who you are or your team. There's an application form that's going to accompany your entrance, where you can list the name of everybody that's in your team. We want to know about what the specific problem you're addressing is. We want to know about your idea, exactly how you think it might work. We want to know about the impact of your idea or the change that your idea might bring about. And maybe something about why your idea might stand out from other ideas that are going on, or from competing ideas as well. And that's it. It's really, really straightforward. We showed you a video earlier from the Mayor, which said that applications close on the 2nd of December. We've extended the deadline to the 9th of December at 5 p.m. So you've got until the 9th of December at 5 p.m. to submit your ideas. If you head to the website, which is included in the link to this meeting and will be sent out to everybody, you'll be able to enter with a video, slides, or a written document. It's really, really straightforward, and we think that you can all enter. We'd love to hear what you have to say about climate change, and the Mayor is really, really keen to get as many ideas as possible from young people. The winners will have access to a cash prize, and also all the finalists will be able to present their idea and pitch it to the Mayor directly. But yes, it's 6:30 now. Our hour is up. Thank you so much for joining us. If you check in the chat, there is a link that you can click on now to go to the page to submit your idea. You can also get in touch with us separately and read more information on the website. These videos will be available online and on social media as well, so you can go back to the lessons you've heard from our experts today for some inspiration. Thanks very much for joining us.